The exoplanet's surface is a jagged tapestry of ice, sculpted by winds sharp enough to flay flesh. Thermals plunge to minus 150 degrees Celsius, freezing atmospheric moisture into diamond dust blizzards that scrape against fractured ridges. Electromagnetic storms pulse overhead, silencing advanced tech, a flaw the aliens overlooked. Their vessel, sleek and silver, lies half buried in a drift. Inside, for arthropod-like beings clutch trembling limbs. Their exosuits, engineered for impenetrable climates, crack audibly at the joints. Brittle fractures spiderweb across helmet visors. One alien collapses, carapace splitting under pressure. Its final wheeze fogs of frozen air. The others stare, mandibles clicking in dread. Their AI hubris is undeniable. Energy shields flicker and die, drones sputter into snowbanks, and heating units now serve as morbid sarcophagi. Primary systems offline. The captain hisses, translator glitching. Backup protocols insufficient. Panic sets in. They were never trained for manual survival. 30 meters east, a figure trudges through the storm. No identifiers, just a patched thermal suit, scorched at the seams. It moves with deliberate rhythm, unbothered by the howling dark. The human stops at the alien wreckage, gloved hands sifting through debris. Shattered drones? Ignored. Glowing power cores? Left buried. Instead, they salvage a bent alloy panel, frayed wiring and sheet of translucent insulation. The aliens detect movement via a dying drone feed. Another subject? The captain rasps. The feed zooms. The human drills into an ice shelf with a salvaged shard, harvesting compacted snow. No chatter, no hesitation. Just a canteen filled, a makeshift sled assembled. The aliens debate a shrill, static-laced argument. Primitive, scoffs the science officer. No shields, no tools. It'll expire within hours. But the human works. Ice is melted using a concave alloy sheet angled toward the storm's bioluminescent haze. Improvised solar reflection. Water drips into a container. Steam snatched by the wind. Next, the insulation is layered into a curved frame, anchored by ice screws. The alien's drone dies mid-transmission, but not before capturing the human crawling inside the half-built shelter, sealing the entrance with polymer scrap. Night deepens. Alien suits groan under cold's weight. The science officer's exosuit fails first, its core overheating in a desperate bid to outlast the storm. The captain watches, paralyzed, as their second crew member's limbs snap off at the joints. Only two remain. They huddle in the ship's corpse, whispering mantras to extinct gods. The human shelter glows faintly, a pinprick of warmth in the infrared. Inside, a hand-crank battery powers a salvage coil, heating the air to a livable minus 30 degrees Celsius. Condensation beads on the walls, refreezing into a protective inner layer. No grand tech, no energy beams. Just physics bent into submission. By dawn, the blizzard wanes. The human emerges unhurried and surveys the ice. Behind them, the shelter stands intact, a sloped dome of scavenger fuse. The alien ship is a tomb now, its remaining occupants motionless, encased in frost. The captain's final act, a garbled distress signal, goes unanswered, but the human is already moving. A cracked alien datapad is pried from ice, studied, then discarded, useless. Instead, they pocket a spool of filament and a heat-resistant canister. Ahead, a geothermal vent steams, a prize spotted hours earlier. The path is treacherous, ice thinning into crevasses, but the human's boots, lined with shredded insulation, find purchase. They don't look back. Survival isn't about mourning. It's about forward motion. The geothermal vent hisses like a living thing, its heat warping the air. The human kneels, testing the ground. Ice thins here, fragile over the planet's simmering veins. A salvaged alloy shard becomes a pickaxe. Strikes are measured, rhythmic. Hours pass. Sweat freezes on their brow, but the ice yields, revealing a fist-sized fissure. Steam billows upward, scalding and immediate. Scavenge wiring braids into a lattice, anchored above the vent. Sheets of insulation drape over it, forming a funnel. Heat rises, trapped by the makeshift chimney. Next, the human returns to the wreckage, prying loose a cracked viewport. It's wedged into the shelter's frame. A crude window, alien alloy panels, bent into overlapping scales, form the outer shell. Each seam is packed with snow, nature's mortar. The alien's last functional drone whirs weakly, observing from a distance. Its camera glitches, struggling to focus. Illogical, mutters the science officer, watching the feed. No energy signature. How is it stable? The human ignores the machine, drilling fingerwit holes into the shelter's ceiling. Condensation drips into a trough, funneled to a collection pouch. Every movement is precise, practiced, no room for error. Night falls again. The shelter glows faintly, heated by geothermal breath. Inside, the human strips off their gloves, exposing raw, frost-nipped hands. A palm-sized generator, cobbled from drone motors and battery scraps. Sparks to life. Wires snake to a cluster of bioluminescent algae pods, scavenged from the ice. Soft blue light floods the space. The drone records it all. They're cultivating, the captain whispers. In a survival trial, the human crushes the algae, extracting viscous fluid. It's smeared onto the shelter's walls, hardening into a radiant glaze. Temperature climbs, -10 degrees Celsius, then -5 degrees. The alien suits, meanwhile, hemorrhage power. Their own heaters, overloaded, have begun melting internal circuits. Dawn cracks the horizon. The human emerges, hauling ice blocks to reinforce the shelter's base. A vent is carved into the roof, adjustable with a sliding alloy plate. Trial and error. Open too wide, heat escapes. Too narrow, moisture pools. By midday, balance is struck. The shelter breathes, steady as a heartbeat. The drone dies, but not before transmitting a final image. The human weaving shredded suit fabric into a rope, then lowering a canister into the fissure. Steam condenses into water, boiling as it rises. The canister is hauled up, its contents poured into a dented flask. The alien ship is silent now, its crew down to 2. The captain's exosuit is fused to their carapace. Every movement cracks chitin. We should replicate the structure, the science officer croaks, mandibles trembling. Use the remaining panels. Absurd, the captain snaps. Our systems will reboot. Their contraption will collapse. But doubt lingers. They watch the human work, baffled by the simplicity. No AI, no fusion cores. Just geometry and stubbornness. By dusk, the thermal capsule is complete. A sloped dome half buried. It seems glittering with frozen algae. The human ducks inside, sealing the entrance with an ice block. Infrared scans show the interior. 5 degrees Celsius. Habitable. The alien sensors, meanwhile, flash critical alerts. Their life support reserves dip below 10%. The science officer staggers toward the wreckage's cargo hold, prying open a locker. Tools scatter, nanoblades, plasma torches, all useless without power. They collapse, hissing as their exosuit fractures. The captain stays rooted, pride overriding instinct. They'll freeze, they rasp. Any moment now. But the human doesn't freeze. Steam curls from the shelter's vent, a taunt written in vapor. The captain's carapace darkens, frost blooming across their thorax. Their final thought is a question, not a curse. What flawed math let this creature outlive us? The shelter hums, a low thrum of geothermal energy channeled through scavenged pipes. Condensation drips into a battered tin cup. The human unclasps their helmet, still faceless, anonymous, and inhales deeply. Air tinged with sulfur and melted ice fills their lungs. They set the cup aside, then pry open a compartment sewn into their suit's inner lining. A single tea bag slips out, its paper tag frayed, the words Earth stamped in faded ink. Outside, the last alien drone lies dead, its lens cracked. But the captain's surviving subordinate, mandibles trembling, patches into the human shelter frequency. Audio only. They hear the scrape of metal, the click of a flint striker. A flame sparks, fed by alien polymer scraps in a dented biomass stove. Water boils. The human pours it over the tea bag, steam curling like a phantom. The aliens huddle in their dead ship, sensors barely functional. "What is that?" the subordinate hisses. "Thermal spikes. Wasteful. Why expend energy on liquid?" The captain's exosuit creaks as they turn. Madness. They'll deplete their heat reserves. But the human sips slowly, deliberately. No urgency, no fear. The tea's scent, earthy floral, floats through the shelter, a sensory relic of a world light years away. The subordinate's claw taps their translator. Query, purpose of ritual? The human doesn't answer. Instead, they peel off a glove, revealing scarred fingers, and dip a fingertip into the tea. Drops splatter the shelter floor, freezing instantly into amber beads. A pattern emerges. A circle, a crosshair, an arrow pointing north. A map, a symbol. The aliens debate in static edge whispers. Weakness, the captain insists. Sentimentality. But the subordinate watches the thermal readouts. The shelter holds steady at 8 degrees Celsius. No energy spikes, no decay. The human stokes the stove, adds more polymer scraps, and brews a second cup. This time, they unseal a pocket, retrieving a sliver of concentrated nutrients. They dissolve it into the tea, stirring with a stripped screwdriver. The captain's exosuit vents a dying hiss. Their metrics illogical. No species prioritizes comfort in extinction scenarios. The subordinate leans closer to the flickering feed. Unless comfort is the metric, the human lifts the cup in a mock toast, steam fogging their visor. A silent joke? Defiance? The gesture gnaws at the alien's axioms. Night deepens. The human dismantles the stove, repurposing its parts into a heat exchanger. The tea bag, drained of flavor, is pressed between alloy plates, a dried keepsake. They slip it back into the suit's lining, sealing it against their chest. Outside, the geothermal vent sputters, its energy waning. The shelter's temperature drops, but the human unfolds a reflective emergency blanket, layering it beneath their suit. Heat ricochets trapped. The subordinate's claws tremble. We could replicate the tea process. Use our nutrient paste. No, the captain rasps. We are advanced. We endure, we do not pretend. But frost glazes their carapace, joints locking. The subordinate crawls toward the wreckage's storage, grasping for a discarded canister. They mimic the human's motions, melting ice, igniting polymer. The flame dies, their claws too stiff to strike the flint. The human, meanwhile, carves a notch into the shelter's wall, for lines crossed by a fifth. A calendar? A tally? They trace the marks, then press their palm against the coldest patch. Ice melts under body heat, reforming as a smooth pane. A mirror? No, a lens. They angle it toward the vent's dying steam, refracting a sliver of warmth onto the tea's frozen beads. They liquefy, pooling into a tiny, steaming oasis. The subordinate's translator crackles. Requests, share thermal strategy. Static, the human adjusts the lens, silent. The captain's breath rattles, a wet, terminal sound. They don't even know we're here. They wheeze, arrogant, savage. But the human hears. Or perhaps they don't. It makes no difference. They unseal the shelter's entrance, letting the steam billow out into the frozen dark. It swirls, forming a helix, a signal to no one. Then they retreat, sealing the ice block behind them. The tea's last warmth lingers in the cup, a defiance etched in degrees. The subordinate systems fail at midnight. The captain dies clutching a shattered power core, its energy long spent. Their final transmission is a fragment, echoing the human's frequency. Why? The answer is the tea bag, saved. The steam wasted. The ritual unbroken. Dawn bleeds across the ice, pale and bloodless. The human emerges, kicking loose the shelter's entrance block. Steam billows out, dissipating into the thin air. They scan the horizon. Alien wreckage juts in the snow like a broken rib cage. No movement, no heat signatures. The storm's aftermath is silent, save for the creak of settling ice. Methodically, the human dismantles the shelter, Alloy panels fold into a compact stack. Wiring coils around their forearm. The geothermal vent, now dormant, is capped with an ice plug. No trace left, save a faint scar in the permafrost. As they work, a low hum fractures the silence. The human freezes, then tilts their helmet skyward. The alien rescue ship descends, its thrusters melting snow into glassy craters. A hatch hisses open. Two figures emerge, thick-limbed, encased in armored exosuits. They survey the wreckage, pausing at the captain's frozen corpse. One prods it with a boot. The body shatters. The other spots a human and stiffens, weapon rising. A voice crackles through their translator. "You survived?" The human nods, silent. The aliens exchange glances. A gauntlet gestures toward the ship. "Board, we'd acknowledge your tenure." The human hesitates, then hoists their salvage materials and follows. Inside, the ship thrums with sterile heat. The aliens remove their helmets, revealing scarred, chitinous faces. The taller one, a new captain, studies a human scrap pile. No systems, no signals. How? They sift the alloy panels, scowling. This is garbage. The human unzips their suit, retrieving the tea bag. They place it on a console, the faded Earth label upward. The alien captain recoils. Organic contraband. Dispose of it. But the younger alien, their carapace still soft at the edges, reaches out. "Wait!" Scans indicate microbial decay. It's non-functional. Why keep it? The human doesn't answer. They reclaim the tea bag, tucking it into their chest pocket. The younger alien's antennae twitch. "Your shelter. Show us the schematics." The human obliges, sketching in melted frost on a viewport. Angles, vent placements, geothermal taps. The captain watches, mandible slack. No code, no AI, just physics. The ship ascends. Through the viewport, the human watches the ice shrink below. At the edge of the wreckage site, they spot a lone figure. The subordinate, barely alive, clawing toward the vent scar. The human says nothing. Weeks later, at a transit hub, the human departs. No farewells. The younger alien lingers, clutching a stolen datapad. The shelter schematics glow on its screen. "Rebuild it," they tell their superiors. "Hybridize their methods with our tech." Mockery follows, but the alien persists. Experiments begin. Efficiency rises. On the frozen exoplanet, winds erase the wreckage. But atop a glacial ridge, a marker remains. The tea bag, sealed in a heat-resistant canister. Snow feathers around it, never quite burying it. Infrared scans will later reveal its faint warmth, a beacon for lost souls. The human vanishes into the stars, faceless, nameless. But their legacy spreads, whispers in alien docks, blueprints traded in shadowed markets. A myth grows that in the galaxy's coldest hells, soft-bodied saviors tread, armed not with plasma, but with stubbornness and steam. The younger alien, now a rebel engineer, etches the shelter's design into their carapace. "We were wrong," they broadcast to their species. Survival isn't supremacy, it's adaptation. Their signal reaches dying worlds, where species on the brink listen and hope. Far away, the human boils water over a scrap metal stove. Another tea bag steeps. Another inhale of Earth's ghost. They smile unseen as stars whirl outside their porthole. Somewhere, an alien child builds a model shelter, laughing as steam curls through ice. The coldest hells, it turns, birth the warmest revolutions.